I'm assuming then that that's going to be a vatting of a few casks then, Matt?
No, it's a finish, but I'm not going to tell you what type. It's a little bit unusual.
I mean, I know I've just got my
in the sense of, yes, yeah, I see what you mean. Sorry. Yeah, Bimber Club effectively will never have single casks.
Yeah.
However many members we get, we will add another cask into the mix to make sure. Yeah, I see what you mean. Sorry, yeah.
I mean, looking at the number I've got, you're nearly up at sort of 850 now by the look of it. So
yeah, we're heading up towards 1,000, and I'm pretty sure at the moment I announce a club bottling that will push on. But yeah, effectively the decision is we will always have enough bottles that if every member said, I want mine, that we've got enough. That's kind of the deal.
With that then, obviously, one way of stopping the flippers in that sense, are you going to keep an eye on what bottles then come onto market and those people that flip may not be given another chance? Or
we are, that's an ongoing conversation. We are we're making sure that people get their their membership number bottle, because people like that. It's their number, and then when they have another one, it's their number again. That does absolutely give us the ability to see what is going on at auction. What we do about it, let's see, but we are aware that it gives us the ability to monitor, to contact those people, and we will take a view on that in time. You've seen it with SMWS. I suspect they're going to be moving to bottle numbers pretty soon if they're going to fulfill their promise of clamping down on flipping. Let's see what happens with what we're doing. Yeah.
Andronic did the Andronic fan page on Facebook. I don't know if anyone's in that, but a friend of mine is, and they did a special release. I think it was like one of the last casks before Billy Walker went to Glenallachie, something like that. And he was saying that somebody flipped theirs. It was a strict sort of one per person. I think it was like an outturn of 600, something like that, and they got banned. So it was all.
I mean, it's something to consider. I saw they all seem Grand Whisky Auctions seems to be the worst for me. It's not even a site that I look at, but they've got all the big bimber. And I noted that someone had flipped their founders package. And so we just sent them an email saying, hi, we saw this on Grand Whisky Auctions, and we're just checking in to make sure that everything is okay with you in life, and there's no problem. Just put it like, i.e., we have seen you, but we're not being shitty about it. We're just saying, are you all right, mate? Is everything okay? Can we do anything? And then see what happens. But just so that person knows that we do pay attention. And I do not want to see people selling Founders Club bottlings and making double their money with another 3 bottles to come in the next 3 years. I mean, it's quite perverse, to be honest.
Yeah,
I mean, that's an interesting one, going back to the blogging side as well, Matt, because I think one thing that came up last year and the year before was a lot of bottles or sample bottles that were sent to bloggers suddenly ending up on auction sites, which, why?
I've seen quite a few of those. I still see them recently. Some of that liquid is pretty expensive, and I don't understand why, when it is an expensive sample, that the PR companies or distilleries don't number them. So that they know. I mean, I have a rule on my website that if I am sent a sample, I will write about it. It might take me a while, because sometimes I just don't want to write about it. I want to write about something else. But if a sample comes in, I will write about it. And I just think it's a moral obligation. But to see bloggers, who knows who they are? They're influencers, definitely. Selling off their samples. There's a really easy way of tracking those, and I'm just amazed people don't.
Yeah. So with that, anyway, obviously the whole reason of trying to get yourself on and Amy was to try and talk about English whiskey and kind of the future of where English whiskey is going to go. And I know I put this question out on Twitter the other day and got quite a few interesting replies, and I kind of think we're all going down the same route. But I think the big question is, do we need a governing body? And if we do, why do we need one? Matt. Amy then. Amy first. Then.
So I'll start, and I'll start with what I said to your response on Twitter. I would say at the moment, what we need is a definition of what English whiskey is. And I think that's going to be quite tough. You know, what are you talking about? Are you talking about the ownership of the distilleries? Are you talking about specific processes for how you make your make? Are you talking about your practices for where you source casks, ABV, blah, blah, blah? There's a lot of technical gumph that might go into that, but I think that needs to happen. In parallel, I believe that the English whiskey distilleries should work together to promote English whiskey. Because there's still, you know, when we go to shows, there's still people, you go up to Scotland, people are like, well, what pish is this? English whiskey, pish. And we're getting there. I mean, it has certainly in the last 12 months really exploded. You know, English whiskey is a thing, but there is a lot of misconceptions around it to get over. So my overall starting point would be define the category, promote the category. At that point, then maybe there needs to be a body of some description who's independent and third party. But yeah, tell me what it is first.
Yeah, Amy?
I agree, but I think it needs to happen very, very soon, actually. So I agree in the kind of sentiment of what it should be, but I think because there are so many conversations that I hear talking to different people, I, you know, hear lots of kind of different things. So when I went to Cotswold yesterday, I think, I don't know if you were on this particular format, but a lot of the distillers, I think there were 8 distilleries that have got together. I think possibly Bimber couldn't go to this one for some reason. And they were talking about potentially having like a percentage that is English barley, for example. And that's one of the defining characteristics, which is quite nice. I think that's like, it gives, you know, a sense of place, but also isn't too restricted. So all those things that Matt said about, you know, cask ownership, blah, 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 are being discussed. But I also know that there are people discussing from the other side, somebody, is it whatever the government body that used to be the UKTI is, can't remember what they're called, like DTI or something. They are already starting to talk from their side as well. And then you've got consumers starting to talk. So, and then you've got distilleries that are making spirit that doesn't necessarily, you know, like there's too many gaps, I think, at the moment where if we don't define it now and if we don't protect it now, I think distilleries could kind of, I'm not, you know, obviously there's the core group of distilleries who are extraordinarily high end, but I think if we don't do something in the next year, I think there could be distilleries that are maybe just general spirit makers. I'm already seeing a few of those, and it's kind of, you know, what are they saying? You know, generally kind of mature, you know, like matured spirit in a blah blah, whatever it is. And I don't want to see those people, or not necessarily, you know, everyone's got a right to do it, but I think it's those kind of types of alcohol kind of creeping into what could be determined as English whiskey. So I think because the government there, I think there's, I think the UKTR, whatever they're called, are employing somebody to look at this area as well. So I think if they're doing it, consumers are on it, people are kind of all about, you know, whiskies from Bimber, from Cotswolds, etc. I think we need to do it sooner rather than later. But
yeah, I mean,
it should be distillery led. Sorry, I think the English Whisky Society is more sort of like, I would say, the link between, I don't think Richard wants it to be a kind of a trade body, but I think it's the link between consumers, distilleries, and possibly, you know, Visit Britain government, but not actually, you know, acting for either one of them. It's a promotional body, a cask, you know, getting people kind of casks and you know, information exchange. So I think actually, you know, I'm not here to just sort of, you know, promote the English Whisky Society, but I think English Whisky Society now, with all the people that are involved, could be a really good, positive force to get all of those people talking to each other.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think from my point of view, looking at it, that we kind of need, like Matt says, a definition of what is English whiskey. So you kind of look at Scotch and Scottish. It's obviously distilled in Scotland, it's matured in Scotland, and it's bottled in Scotland. Is that enough to make English whiskey English? You know, or do we need to go a little bit further and say, well, yes, we've got to use English barley, which to me is a negative, because surely it doesn't matter where the barley comes from, as long as it's a standard that's good enough to make.
Well, I'm just also seeing the question about there's not enough barley, but actually what's happening also behind the scenes is that there are discussions with more growers, let's say, to to become part of that conversation and establish there's potentially going to be a maltings as well, a UK an English maltings.
So obviously crisps are English, aren't they? Maltings.
Yes.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Crisps maltings, they're English. So.
Yeah. Sorry, I mean a new one.
Right. Sorry. Yeah.
So I don't think anyone's saying that they want 100% English barley, because that just would be impossible. But could it be 20%, as long as there's 20%, or not? It doesn't, as you said, it doesn't have to be, as long as it's a good quality barley, because obviously Scotch doesn't have to be. So I don't know, but these are all the conversations, and it could be kind of exciting because they could take the blueprint for Scotch and actually, could it be more a kind of provenance based? I'm not going to utter the T word, sorry, because I don't want to go there today.
I kind of disagree there, saying that there wouldn't be enough barley, because I think there would. Because England is one of the major barley growing areas in the world. Never mind, all we've got to do in that sense is we've got to make it viable for the farmers to sell to English distilleries rather than Scotch distilleries.
Yeah,
which would
probably amazing. But I don't want to talk about the T word or the B word.
No,
the T word is and I think that's another reason why the government side of things are kind of taking note, because there's an opportunity. And I think if they're starting to link up to the distilleries, then at some point they need to listen to the consumers as well, in terms of what people want.
I mean, I don't think there's any problem talking about the T word, because I'm presuming we're talking about traceability.
Yes.
But no, I mean, that to me, the traceability side of things is extremely important, and if we can trace it to English farms, then fantastic. I'm all behind the traceability and the transparency side. Is there another T? I can't remember what the other one was. Yeah, I think it comes in little bags and you put it in a cup of coffee, but a cup of tea, sorry, should I say. But no, I do think going down the route of saying English whiskey is distilled in England, it's matured in England, and it's bottled in England, but does that logistically become a nightmare for those that maybe don't bottle in England?
So when it comes to a definition, I think the industry will have to decide on one of two things or both. I.e., are they trying to define how they are different from Scotland, from Ireland, from other distilling nations, or are they trying to provide a definition which simply maintains standards? And those two are potentially the same, but they're also potentially different things. I.e., to make yourself different from other countries, you need to say, these are the uniquenesses. But to define a category on standards, it stops other players coming in with their matured spirit in Acorn or whatever and saying it's English whiskey. And those two things might be the same, but they might not. And so I do think that the distilleries need to decide, we need to define the category, but why are we defining the category? Are we defining the category to keep people out who aren't doing it properly? Absolutely we are, because we want the quality. Because if there's a player in the market who is producing English whiskey and it's crap, it brings us all down. But are we also trying to define to say we are different? And that is the bigger question. I don't know if we necessarily are saying we are different in terms of process. We might be different in terms of purpose.
But when we're talking about difference, we're talking about difference from Scotch, really, aren't we?
Sure.
And I guess it's whether it's important for us. And I think it's becoming more important. We've all forgotten about Brexit, really. And this is not a sort of political thing about who voted for what, but there is an opportunity to build up English whiskey as a brand that comes from England that is very, very highly defined as something that could be a very, very quality, provenance-based product from England, and have the same kind of cachet around the world that Scotch does. And then that would be about finding differences from Scotch. But then I don't like.
I mean, would every distillery be okay with that?
Kind of implies that there is a set standard, and that is Scotch. So
this is something that's getting brought across all of it, because it's something we're coming across, with the Indian whiskies. And Amrut, Paul John, Rampo are putting a lot of work, a lot of money in creating a single malt whiskey. Guys all know the majority of whiskey made in India is maybe 1 or 2% single malt, the rest of it's molasses. They're now working together as a group to get that definition of what is an Indian single malt so that we don't have one of those guys that produce that molasses stuff and then ship it out across. I'd been told there's at least another 12 distilleries in India that are looking at wanting to launch internationally with single malts. I believe one of them's due to launch in the next few months. You know, so I think it's something that is coming across everywhere. And I think Matt and Amy are both right. You need that definition of what is English, and then from there you work on things. I see everybody talking about the Scotch ones, but a lot of people, and I'll say it on the board because it's truth, a lot of people forget that money talks, and I can name you 4 or 5 Scottish distilleries that do not bottle in Scotland.
I mean, I think
thousands of bottles abroad.
Yeah. I mean, I think personally that, in my mind, the definition of English needs to be a minimum standard where we say, you know, you've got to meet this standard. It's got to be done this way, and it's got to be done like this. To stop those kind of smaller distilleries maybe trying to go sideways and bring out extremely strange experimental things. But I also think, you know, we do maybe need to say to the industry that, look, you know, if you buy a bottle of English whiskey, this is the minimum standard we're going to go to. It's probably going to be very similar to the SWA, but we will allow some slightly sideways things. But if we do bring, to me, if we do bring a governing body together, it needs to be those people involved in the distilleries themselves that make their own mind up, rather than somebody telling us what we've got to do.
But why can't it just fail on commerciality? If someone produces something that's rubbish, people try it and they won't buy it again?
That affects the rest of the industry as well.
Yeah.
If you've got something for being sold as English whiskey and somebody tries poor English whiskey, it then goes across the board to all the distilleries, not just the one that they've tried from.
It's guilt by association, isn't it?
Yeah. Sorry, go on, Claire.
Yeah, so I'm going to come in sort of like from the industry that I work in, because I get a little bit narky about having a number of self-appointed regulators who have all come together and try to set standards. Yet so there's 2 main ones, and both their standards are slightly different. And when you come down to the people who are actually doing the work, yet are involved in these associations, a lot of the people are more qualified than the associations themselves. So from the point of view of a consumer and someone sort of semi-involved, I think the first question I'd want to be asking is, why do you want an association in the first place? And who is it actually serving? So is it serving the consumer in the fact that you've agreed a set of common standards that anybody who's going to buy an English whiskey will know it has to achieve that common standard for it to be, you know, sold at a reasonable price, etc.? Or is it protecting the distillers from, I don't know, something else? It's who are you serving in the first place to have that governing body? Because in horticulture, we have these governing bodies who are all self-appointed regulators. Yet I'm more qualified than the people who chair them when it comes to certain things like health and safety.
Mm.
And anyone who's a member of those associations has to pay to be a member of those associations. And therefore, they're going to be expecting something back from those associations, whether it's certain documentation that they don't know how to get hold of, certain insurances they don't know how to get hold of. Who are you serving and for what purpose?
Yeah,
and then you go forwards and you come up with your common standards and how you're going to behave as an association. What are you giving people? I know that sounds a little bit like convoluted, but I think the starting point is the why you're going to have it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, who are you serving?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important two parts in there that sort of stand out to me, that why, I think the why is because we've got to set a standard for English whiskey. We've got to have some sort of standard for English whiskey.
And for whose purpose is that standard?
I think it's for both the consumer and the distilleries themselves, because if you don't have a minimum standard of what you are making, then you can cut corners to the point of putting not any old rubbish out. Because again, I go back to the fact of most people making whiskey have the pride and their, you know,
So it's to create a confidence within the industry.
Yeah.
That if someone has, say, you went ahead and you had, I don't know, some sort of stamp, some sort of mark that represents that this distillery belongs to or is a member of the English Whisky Association. That as a consumer, I've never had English whiskey before, but it's been, okay, it looks like it should hit a particular standard. I'm more happy to try that than a bottle that doesn't have that on it.
I mean, I come from the side of the farming background where we produce food for, obviously, for eating. So we go under the Red Tractor logo, where if you see the Red Tractor, we have to meet certain standards to produce whatever we produce. And I kind of think we need that. If you're going to go down the line and call yourselves English whiskey, we need that minimum standard so people have a confidence to buy what we're going to put out. If there's no minimum standards and people are putting rubbish out, then people are not going to buy it. I mean, I remember working on a stand with Paul John, and somebody turned around to me and said, "Oh, I've had Indian whiskey. It's rubbish. It's terrible." Well, what Indian whiskey have you had? Oh, I don't know. Well, maybe you should try some more Indian whiskey before you make your mind up that it's rubbish, because otherwise, you don't know what you've tried before. It could have been like Craig said, one of the molasses sort of things, or it could have been a blended whiskey or anything. The point is, we have to have a minimum standard, in my mind. I mean, I know you've got quite a lot to say, Matt. So, you know, what would you like to see as a definition of English whiskey?
That's a really good question, and I'm going to pass on that one, mate. So there are the distillers are, as you know, we are talking about this, and there are two working groups. One is on definition, and one is on promotion and looking at the category, not at the definition. And I'm on the latter one. I'm on the promotional side because that plays to my skills. But what I would say, and I've just put in the chat box, is look at Japanese whiskey. Look at how that exploded, and how there has been a diversification of that market to the point where there is even more wineries and soju producers putting out what they're saying is Japanese whiskey and that isn't. And there is a danger that if English whiskey continues on this trajectory of being a thing and being really important, that bad actors will then go, right, well, I'm going to get in on that market. And so I firmly believe, both in Japan and in England, that a standard is required to attempt to prevent that, to try to maintain that high quality watermark. But that's not the same as a regulatory body. I mean, my background is trade bodies. That's where I've done a lot of my PR in engineering and science. And their primary function is lobbying. It's going to the government and it's getting the economic conditions right for those businesses that they represent. You don't need a regulatory body to all, between the distillers, 25 in England or something like that, to all agree that we agree these are the standards that we're all going to work to. You don't need a regulatory body, a third party, to do that. There might come down the line a point where there's added benefit to it, but I believe that we can set that standard now between ourselves and all be comfortable with it, and that provides that protection. And whether that's a watermark or you go to either the European Union or after this year the government for a kite mark, let's see. But yeah, I don't think we need a lot of red tape. We just need to agree what is acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're on 27 distilleries now in the UK, and that's growing over time. So if we're on 27, to me, we need to start looking now, like Amy said earlier, it kind of needs to be sooner rather than later to set those standards, to stop people just coming in and throwing some rubbish out just to make some money, in a sense. And again, it comes back to the definition of English whiskey. What is the definition, and what are the standards we want to put out there? And I mean, looking at it from a business side for Amy in a bar, if you start promoting English whiskey, you need some sort of standard on the bar, surely.
I mean, it would be nice, but from a bar side, we promote lots of different types, and with Scotch we will talk about the kind of regulations. It's not, it's, to be completely honest, it's that side of things is too complicated for the majority of people drinking whiskey. You know, we're in a luxury. I mean, obviously there are many knowledgeable whiskey drinkers around the country and the world, but the majority of people I see coming into a bar in somewhere like Birmingham are not, you know, apart from the hardcore regulars, that side of things it's too kind of complicated. And unless they're coming in a lot, and you can kind of have those explanations, but we try and do things in like flight boards and tasting packages, etc., etc. So I think for the consumer, for the majority of consumers, it's just got to be something easy. Having a kite mark on a bottle, as long as I guess it's easy to explain.
Yeah,
but I think it's more, for me, more about sort of you know, quality and protection and selling outside England as well.
Yeah. I mean, I would assume for people coming into the bar, if they're not very well genned up on Scotch and English whiskey, they're going to come in and they're going to want Scottish whiskey because that's the one everybody knows. And if you say to them, well, try this English whiskey, and they say, well, is it as good? You know, if you've got a standard there, then you kind of say, well, yeah, you know, it's produced to a very high standard.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, most people are the people sort of starting their journey. So we get a lot of people kind of coming in. They kind of they want to see the, you know, the known stuff, but they just want to know that it's a good quality. A lot of people have read about it, interestingly, and you know, will come in. They've heard of Bimber, they've heard of Cotswolds, but actually, to be perfectly honest, if me or my team said, actually, this is really good, that's all they need.
Yeah.
As long as I have confidence in it, and the people that I employ have confidence in it and understand a bit of it, then that's fine. A lot of people don't want the chat. They just want you to tell them that they want to be, you know, have confidence that the places that they're buying from know what they're talking about.
Yeah, and you know, this is where, to me, I mean, I'm just sort of looking at some bottles that we have out there, and you know, a lot of the bottles that are maybe coming out of England don't necessarily say English whiskey. So is that because they're not proud of being English, or because they don't want to put English whiskey on in case it puts some consumers off?
Well, I think actually I've been working with Chris Borrow on this, on the dram team, and actually to do the labelling properly, you need to have the categorisation, and I think the categorisation that he uses, I'm pretty sure is something like English single malt.
Yeah.
But that's not a, you know, something sworn in. It's just, as you know, it has to have this category element, and that's what it's going in as.
Yeah. I mean, maybe Matt can tell me better, because I haven't actually got a Bimber bottle here. It's in the other room. But does on the Bimber bottlings, does it say English whiskey, or is it the one I've got here says single malt London whiskey?
Oh, London.
Single malt London whiskey is how we are describing it, but as I put in the chat box, that is a decision on brand and positioning. If you look anywhere on our website, we do talk about English whiskey.
Yeah.
I suspect we might look at that, not in terms of the brand, but in terms of if we did come together to promote English whiskey as a mutual thing, that we might look at the text on the back, which is common across all the bottles, and make sure it was clear there. But London is very much our thing, but that is not a category of whiskey. No,
exactly. Yeah. You know, and it's interesting the fact that you have gone down the London route rather than English. You know, to me, as an outlooker, kind of looks on that and think, yeah, it's London whiskey, but again, what is London whiskey then? Is it something different to English whiskey? But obviously not.
It's not a thing, and I throw that back to you and say, what's Highland whiskey as opposed to Scotch whiskey?
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing with Highland whiskey and Speyside, it's obviously a region which was put in there, and I kind of think that's less important these days than anything now, because to me, a region in Scotland is so cross-border. You know, you've got Speyside whiskies that are peated, heavily peated. You've got Islay whiskies that are now non-peated. So what does a region mean anymore?
Yeah, so it's London. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Still, it's English whiskey, but the fact that we put London on it, the fact that we love London, we're based in London, and that people like London, that's it. Don't read any more into it than that.
We don't all like London. It's too busy.
Hands off London.
You're coming down in your tractor in a few weeks, aren't you, Soren? So
Yeah, there's only one good thing in London, and that's Tottenham.
He'll be driving sheep across London Bridge, up the traffic.
Chickens.
We're allowed to do that. Anyway, let's get back to whiskey. We're not talking about thingy, but I mean, again, you know, obviously with the English Whisky Society, I mean, it is a shame we couldn't get Richard on as well, but obviously we have got Amy. So where does the English Whisky Society actually see long-term heading? You know, what is the sort of main goal of that?
To be completely honest, I think it's still fairly undefined, and I think like Richard is doing a brilliant job, and he's been really communicative with lots of distilleries. But as we're finding, and as you know, you both have, well, people have said that there are distilleries that seem to be popping up all the time, or general spirit makers turning their hands to whiskey. I think from what we have discussed, it's going to be more consumer focused, and I think that's the kind of, and as I said before, like the sort of the link. And I think he's mindful of not kind of, like Matt talked about the distillery working groups that are happening, like not kind of interrupting that or trying to take it over, like being sort of complementary rather than trying to everybody sort of do the same thing. So I think he wants to look at it as a membership thing. He wants to look at it as a cask buying thing, probably events, and just sort of, you know, linking people up, writing the stories thing. So I'm saying, I think it's going to be more consumer, but it might be that it does well at that, and there's an opportunity to be you know, more kind of trade focused, I guess, maybe links into the government. So I honestly I don't know, and I think he'd probably say the same if he were here, because it is all new, and obviously we're trying to get the festival. The festival is the first thing to do, and he's got a mailing list. We've already had over 200 people sign up to a mailing list in a very, very short space of time, without a website, without really any kind of, you know, good branding. He's just working through a logo, which is looking really cool. So, but as I said, he works full time. We all work full time, so nobody can really kind of give huge amounts of time to it. And I think that's quite a good thing, because it's seeing how the distilleries are discussing as well, and, you know, acting on that information. So yeah.
So regarding the festival then, I mean, I know obviously a few of us are obviously in the know of what the idea with that is, but talking long term, when it becomes where people can actually come in person rather than this year's virtual, is the idea for it to be 100% English whiskies only, or is it the idea that we're going to push the English whiskies, but we will invite other distilleries into the fold?
No, and actually this hasn't been discussed, but as far, there's no point, is there, inviting any other distilleries? And even, you know, there's, I think, a couple of bottlers bottlers I'm sure would be welcome, as, you know, as long as it is, they're not just English bottlers bottling other things, as long as it's bottling English whiskies. But I don't think so. One of the reasons that I got talking to him, because I was actually going to do so obviously I've got Whiskey Brum, but I was going to do a full English, sorry, actually that's a really good name. I'm going to write that down.
Sausages.
That's, yeah, okay, the full English, cool. So I was going to do an English Whisky Festival in Birmingham, because being the most sort of central kind of whiskey hub, I thought that was quite nice, and I wanted to see if you know, because I think the festival market is a whole other conversation, but and so one of the reasons that I'm kind of on HP source cask, yes.
No, it's gonna be rare.
Maybe if English whiskey remains undefined, then, you know, we could do that. So it will hopefully be a physical thing. I would really push for it just to be English whiskey, and I think that's an easier sell to, you know, to try and get support, because I would really like to kind of lobby the government and just say, you know, can you give us some dosh please, because we're going to be working very hard to you know, promote, to work with the distilleries. And I think it'd be great if Richard could be full time on it, you know, or at least, you know, 2 or 3 days a week. And I think, like, he's really kind of enthused and stuff. So I think festivals, but there's no point in doing anything else. So yeah, just English.
I mean, I think, and Matt will probably agree with me here. It's a very exciting time to get involved with English whiskey. It's at its infancy in a sense, and hopefully what comes will be very exciting. But my only worry with an all English whiskey festival at this point is you're probably only going to have 5 distilleries with products. Everybody else can come and talk, but is that going to be enough to get people on board at this stage, knowing the fact that you're looking at the festivals now?
Well, we shall see, I guess. To be honest, I think because it doesn't need to be a massive moneymaker right now, and it doesn't, and you know, nobody is drawing salary. Any money that comes from it will go on a website and cash purchases if there's surplus. So this is literally dipping a toe in the English waters. But there are actually, you know, the way we're structuring it, there is going to be an element of new make. There is going to be an element of panel discussions around new distilleries. There's going to be some aged spirit, but not quite old enough to be called whiskey. And then we've got the likes of yourself. We've got Bimber, Cotswolds, Lakes. So there are, a handful of distilleries where we can do sessions, but it's not like Somerton. It's not going to be people receiving a big box of goodies. It will be sort of tasting panels, and some of those won't have any whiskey, or you can just have have a dram while people chat. So it's going to be, it's a really good format actually. I'm not
no, I mean, I totally agree with it. Will work at the moment with a virtual side, because I think the virtual side, rather than an in-person type festival, they're obviously very vastly different. And the virtual side, I think you can do it with 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 distilleries on board and still have a full day of very good topic and conversation. And like I say, it's an exciting. My concern is if we look at next year and it's an in-person festival with 5 stands or 6 stands or 10 stands, are the customers going to walk in there and think, you know, you've maybe got a distillery or 2 with 2 products on the table, and you've got, say, maybe us with 4 or 5. It's not a vast amount of liquid in the.
But I think my personal opinion of festivals is that there are too many that are too similar anyway. And I think working with English whiskey, I mean, if we're going to do it, it'll be sort of, I don't know, maybe summertime next year. There'll be at least a couple more, 2 or 3 more who are past the 3 years. It's not, you know, going to be just you buy your ticket and you drink until you're flat on the face at the end. It's about talks and education, and there are loads of little bits and bobs that you can do when you don't have lots of people. But I think actually it's really niche, and I think it'll be really nice. It will be a bit higher end, probably a little bit more expensive than normal, but but we would concentrate on festival bottlings, membership stuff. I think there's loads of ways that you can make a festival really interesting. My festival started really small, and we built them really, really gradually.
I mean, I think the thing that would, as me personally, my opinion would be that, do we go down the line of kind of conference type things where it's more about discussion, it's more about talk, but we have those masterclasses, we have the product on stand, that way.
Yeah, there's all that kind of potential. I mean, to be honest, we're not really thinking, because we want a really kind of specific venue. It will probably be, if it does go non-virtual, which I hope it will, probably somewhere in the Midlands. So, it's easily accessible. I won't say any more because we haven't really discussed it. Yeah. I think there's a way you can make festivals, much more interesting than just having one room with loads of stands and people sampling. And, at the end, everyone's been to a festival. We all know how it gets, especially brands here and people who have worked the festivals as well. And I don't think it's a dying format yet, but I don't know how long some of them will survive for. And I think it's actually really nice to work in a way that you can just be more creative and kind of have a really nice day. It's a bit more sedate. It's, as you say, Soren, possibly not totally conference style, but there is that element of, discussion but maybe dinners and, just, I don't know.
I think that's it. But I mean, have you got any more to add to this, Matt? Anything you'd like to say on that side of things?
I don't think so. I mean, I would certainly concur that I think there are too many of the very similar ilk of festivals. And I do think when it comes to something like English, that you're looking at a niche within a niche. But that doesn't mean it can't work.
Sorry, can I just interrupt you for a second? I completely forgot that we ran. Simon has just said that, and at my last festival, we did an English whiskey room, and he said that went really well. So there's your proof that it can work. So we just did a whole English whiskey room as part of a bigger festival. So sorry, I just
I think it can work, Simon. I mean, if you remember, like literally the one time I see you every year is in January at the Harrow Whisky Festival, which is the smallest event I go to. And there's what, a dozen stands, some with not a lot of whiskey. And I love that event because it's not just all about arms in, get as much down you. You can take your time, you can chat to the people on the stand, chat to some of the brands. And for me, an English whisky event would be something of that size and ilk. It would be smaller, but ergo deeper. And I think that has a particular appeal. And I think for dividing up the category to say, actually, English whisky is small, but it is deeper, and you can learn more, and you can have more of an experience, is probably a great thing for us, rather than saying, hey, here's an English whisky festival with 200 whiskies, because then that positions us exactly the same as all the other events. So no, I completely agree with Amy. I think it's absolutely possible. And the more that we can make it experiential and give people sort of learnings, the more we're going to benefit from that, I'd say.
I think exciting. It's a good opportunity. Simon has also reminded me that I put Penderyn in the room, but we didn't really know what else to do with them. So they can't
that would be an interesting thing at some festivals in the future. You know, I think Harrow would work because of the rooms, and obviously Amy's has worked. That if we have areas for where the whiskies go, so you have an area purely for English, you have an area for the Welsh on their own somewhere, you know, and then the Scottish, the Irish, the world whiskies, whatever you want to call them. That would be an interesting way to go, as far as I can see. That
well, that's what we did. We did English. We did one English room, one indie bottling room, and then everything else.
And that's an interesting thing, because then you then get the people walking into that room knowing exactly what they're going for.
Yeah, but there's always like you know, this is a discussion from the time. The festival format needs to change. It is, you know, and it's very hard to, you know, Whiskey Exchange is amazing, obviously, and very few whiskey festivals will ever be that kind of, have that kind of approach and be able to do it like that. But I think there's a real opportunity in the festival market to do different stuff. As you said, no one likes you know, give me a whiskey at the, you know, end of the day, and people don't really care what they're drinking. I think that's what I would like to see festivals change into.
Yeah, but
I would say, from my point of view, you know, a number of festivals I've done yours, Amy, which have been great. You know, Matt, we've met up at Harrow, we saw her
every year, mate. Nice, always good to see you there.
I completely agree with you. That small, personal festival is so much better, and I think what you're proposing in that more in-depth over a small section of whiskey, I think that will get you a better clientele that's going to turn up. The people that are interested. You're not going to get the person that's just going to turn up because it's cost them £20 and they know they're going to walk out of there like
really party.
Yeah.
But that's why, like, the venue is so important. And with English, it's actually about taking whiskey fans from England, from the UK, well, Europe or whatever. So it's not about like whiskey brum, it's localized. It's meant to be, although we have people like flying in from Germany randomly, and we have a regular from something like the Isle of Skye, but it is like at least 80% local. But having a festival like this where it's a theme and a very specific topic, it really gives, I don't know, it just gives like a nice amount of creativity and a way we can kind of approach a venue, you know, an interesting venue. We don't have to have it in Birmingham City Centre, which would be amazing. We can do something interesting. We've got ideas, but I'm not going to tell you, basically, because I haven't actually talked to Richard about them yet, so I should probably do that first.